Parliament is tomorrow expected to vote on a motion to scrap the 30% pass mark, or at least pass rate, as described by Build One South Africa. The motion was commissioned by the leader of Build One South Africa, Musi Maimane. Maimane argues that 30% is a low threshold that does a disservice to the country.
I mean, finally, somebody with common sense. And shout out to Musi Maimane. I know that Musi Maimane has been talking about this issue for quite a while now. And it seems like Musi Maimane is one of the few people that are concerned about the education system in this country. We know, guys, the education system in this country is trash, it's rubbish. And as for other politicians, they are occupied with God knows what. And I think it goes into what we've been talking about, that a lot of politicians in this country, the only reason why they want to get rid of the ANC is not because they want to improve the lives of the people of this country, but they want to take advantage of South Africans. A lot of politicians understand that the majority of South Africans are uneducated, and it's quite easy to manipulate South Africans. And these people have been watching the ANC manipulate South Africans for the past 30 years. And they are trying to get to the power so that they can do the same. They don't have the best intention for the people of this country. That's why you don't see a lot of political parties roll out the political education. That's why you don't see a lot of political parties actually fight for the children in this country to get a better education system. Because they understand, once you get these people educated and these people understand the politics, there is no way they would exist. There's no way they would exist. I don't know, guys. Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
Parliament is tomorrow expected to vote on a motion to scrap the 30% pass mark, or at least pass rate, as described by Build One South Africa. The motion was commissioned by the leader of Build One South Africa, Musi Maimane. Maimane argues that 30% is a low threshold that does a disservice to the country. He joins us now to speak about his party's confidence ahead of the vote tomorrow. Musi, good evening. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Before we get into the substance of it, I think we do need to talk about the effect that this vote would have. It ultimately wouldn't change anything just yet, except it's a motion and that states the view of Parliament, but it doesn't compel the minister to change the policy, and or it doesn't introduce a new law. That would have to be through a bill vote. But why is this vote nonetheless important for you?
It's absolutely crucial because I think it's criminal that we ask young people to pass school at 30% or to pass any subject at 30%. I think it also communicates deeply about our level of ambition as a country. So the motion in and of itself doesn't just deal with the question of 30%. It articulates a number of reforms in education, and it sets a curriculum and an assessment reform, which means that the minister will, by at least a resolution of Parliament, have to say to herself that she needs to take that into account, make the appropriate adjustments. Assessment criteria is something that is well within her purview. And so I would urge the Minister of Basic Education to have a deep appreciation of what the people of South Africa are asking for. And Parliament is the only place where South Africans are represented. And therefore, it will be important for her to take that into account.
And guys, am I the only person who don't see the importance of Siviwe Kgarobe to be in the office as the Minister of Basic Education if she's not going to get involved in such things? Am I the only person? Because if you are the new Minister of Basic Education from a political party that has never held the ministerial position before, you should come with a sledgehammer, man. You should come with a sledgehammer. But the update of this story is going to upset you. But guys, we will get to that.
Communicates deeply about our level of ambition as a country. So the motion in and of itself doesn't just deal with the question of 30%. It articulates a number of reforms in education, and it sets a curriculum and an assessment reform, which means that the minister will, by at least a resolution of Parliament, have to say to herself that she needs to take that into account, make the appropriate adjustments. Assessment criteria is something that is well within her purview. And so I would urge the Minister of Basic Education to have a deep appreciation of what the people of South Africa are asking for. And Parliament is the only place where South Africans are represented. And therefore, it will be important for her to take that into account when she goes and does assessments for next year.
Okay. Musi, are you not perhaps having a non-existent debate? Because let's talk about what the worst case scenario pass actually does constitute. And that is just passing on national senior certificate. You must obtain 40% for your home language, 40% for 2 other subjects. So that's 40% for 3 subjects. And then 30% for 3 other subjects out of the 7 subjects. If you average the worst case scenario, that's not 30%. It's at worst case scenario 35%. And if we look at last year's statistics of 2024 matric class, it is only 189 learners out of 727,000 learners that actually passed on the bare minimum worst case scenario. We're talking here, Musi, about 0.03% of last year's class. This seems to be a non-existent problem.
The media, just like with the politicians, the only thing that they are worried about is the numbers. And this is what the ANC has been doing this entire time. The ANC has been happy to come out to say 80% of the matriculants have passed, meaning that we have worked as the government of the ANC. Yay! But we don't talk about the quality of that education. And we don't talk about the number of children that are actually going to advance after finishing matric. And it is sad because today, as we speak, there are children in this country that goes to school, they finish matric, and after matric, they still cannot read or write for many. But as long as they passed. So this guy from the media is just representing that view that we want as many of these people to pass. We don't care about the standard. We don't care about the quality of the education that they are getting. And even if it means that we are going to lower the standards, let's lower the standard so that many of them can pass. This is the argument that he's basically making. And it's quite sad, man. It's quite sad. And it has been frustrating watching the ANC throughout with Angie Motshekga presenting these results and making it seem like they are actually succeeding. But in truth, they are not succeeding. In honest truth, they are not succeeding. Because many of these people that finish matric, they cannot even get into universities. Because there are higher standards there. They are not used to the higher standards. And what Musimemane is saying is that let's get them to work right now, so that they are not shocked when they get to tertiary. Let's get them to work right now. And why are we setting such a low standard for the children in this country? This is the future of this country. We are talking about the future of this country. Why are we setting such a low standard? But it seems like the only thing that these people are interested in is presenting these numbers. Yeah, as long as we have, out of 10 students, we have 8 students that have passed, let's clap hands. Let's clap hands. And I think it is genuinely sad, man. It is sad.
Language, 40% for 2 other subjects. So that's 40% for 3 subjects. And then 30% for 3 other subjects out of the 7 subjects. If you average the worst case scenario, that's not 30%. It's at worst case scenario 35%. And if we look at last year's statistics of 2024 matric class, it is only 189 learners out of 727,000 learners that actually passed on the bare minimum worst case scenario. We're talking here, Musi, about 0.03% of last year's class. This seems to be a non-existent problem.
No, it's completely a misdiagnosis of the issue. Because when you look at it from that perspective, then let me ask the question, what is the material harm that would happen if you said, instead of us just passing at 40% for the 3 subjects and 30 for the other 3, why don't we move it up? Because frankly, if we are asking learners to be proficient at 30, we're setting them up for failure. Secondly, when that same child, which the majority of students, in fact, only a few get a bachelor's pass, which they go up. If you really had to benchmark South Africans against 50%, which is what a university would assess it at, or a TVET college would assess it at, you would discover that the majority of our students who get a national senior certificate are only being prepared for unemployment. Yes. So it's not just a question of just, and this 30% number tells you that in core subjects like math, science, technology, economics, when you look at some of those subjects and you were to say to yourself, you benchmark at 30%, the number of learners who in fact pass mathematics then at 67%. But if you move it up to 50%, you discover that that number drops down literally to 30%. So it tells you that we've got a 30% population of matriculants who are passing mathematics at 50%. And when we benchmark ourselves internationally, we then realize that Asian countries who have, at the same period of the last 30 years, have been able to develop economically and ended up in the G20, you discover that the majority of their assessment is based on 50%. Why are we setting the standards low? I often say to people, Oliver, that if at the Olympics, I have to run a 100-meter race, and I have to run it at 10 seconds to qualify. Of course, I have to do a whole lot of things to get that 10%. I have to eat well, I have to train well. There's a whole routine that goes into it. I can't say, well, I can't eat well or train well, therefore please make it 15 seconds for the 100-meter rate. That would be asking standards to be lowered.
Okay, so let's test that on the actual numbers, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, your idea of what it should take to pass matric is that the bare minimum pass should be whatever gets you into university, and that is, let's call it a 50% average, right? Am I understanding you correct on that? So anyone who falls below that threshold, so anyone below that threshold should not be passing matric.
They should, because they are TVET. And if you cannot qualify for a university, you can also go to the TVET. I don't like, oh my goodness. It is not only about the university. We have the TVET colleges too.
Am I understanding you correct? In your view, that is.
Of course I don't.
I mean, like, the standard should be going to the university. But then we know, like, this is life. Not everybody can be able to get to university. But if you don't get to university, at least you can get to TVET college. But the standard that should be set, is for the children to go to university. That should be the standard.
I don't think so. I think why are we accepting less?
Okay, so let's look at the numbers, Musi. 47.9%, almost 50% of those who wrote matric last year actually passed with a bachelor admission pass. That is to say, with good enough to get into university. That's 50% of the 727,000 learners, right? If you are to say anyone who didn't pass must remain behind, are you not afraid that you're taking learners who otherwise could do well in a technicon or a college that has a lower admission requirements than that, because there are ways in which they will address the pedagogical gaps that would have existed across the span of the 12 years through a bridging program and through additional support programs. They're able to ensure that the learner catches up and that they're able to complete a diploma program at a bare minimum, which makes them employable. Should we not then rather focus on that rather than retaining so many, half the learners in matric, once again subjecting them to overcrowded classrooms with a shortage of teachers where our resources just don't stretch to?
Well, let me first of all say that the proof is always in the pudding. So
and guys, don't you find it strange that suddenly the media is worried about the resources? If many of these children cannot pass, now they are worried about the resources and the classes that will be full. But the same media is protecting the ANC when they are opening up the doors and telling the schools to admit the children of illegal foreigners in classes without providing any documentation. When it comes to that, no, the resources are here. When it comes to Musi Maimane saying that we should up the standard, no, what about these ones that are going to fail and we don't have enough resources? I don't understand. I do not understand. They are fine. The media never criticized this Bela bill when it says that the children of illegal foreigners can be enrolled in schools without providing any documentation. And we've been speaking about the resources to say that, guys, we don't have the resources to teach all the children in Africa. And they said, no, you guys are just xenophobic. But now Musi Maimane is talking about upping the standard. Suddenly the topic of resources comes. How?
To your exact analogy, if I keep matters exactly the same, change nothing, don't change the assessment criteria and keep it exactly the same, just over 8 million young people are in needs. They're not in employment, they're not in education, they are not in training. The reality of it is that the majority of citizens who are unemployed have a sub-matric or the current equivalent matric that you are describing. The throughput level at a TVET college, when you put the same learners with the same national senior certificate, is now at 9%. So the point is keeping the standards low does not cure the very problem you are describing. So when we say that, of course, at 47% as those who passed with a bachelor's degree, we must then as a nation say to ourselves, that is our realistic matric pass mark, not this fictitious 80%, because that 80% is quite deceptive when you think about it from this perspective. If 8 out of 10 of our learners at the age of 10 cannot read for meaning, how do they suddenly, through a system, end up passing so significantly and getting 80%?
Yeah, but Musa, you're now critiquing a different problem. You're now critiquing a problem of the actual content of what is being taught, which is a curriculum question and not a pass rate question.
No, it's not.
But just
it's
maybe
an assessment question.
Just maybe a last question to consider here. Are you not perhaps trying to solve a resource crisis through other means other than talking about resources? And I'll tell you why I say that's the case. Let's assume that the 50%, that the bare minimum threshold would be a bachelor admission pass. That is to say 50%. And 727,000 learners sit for matric, they write it, and they achieve that. But you have less than half of them being able to go to university because of the amount of available spaces in university. You still have so many learners that will get lost in the system because there's a resource limitation.
No. The point is, of course, not everyone is going to end up at university. But now if I send them to TVET, they've got a higher quality matric pass, which means their throughput is much better. When I put them to the job market, they've got a skill that they can sell. If I send them overseas, they can compete with G20 member nations. That's the options I'm putting forward. But if I just simply keep it at 30%, I'm really preparing them for unemployment. And it's not just.
So what happens to the bottom half that fail?
It's about triggering reform.
What happens to the bottom half that
reform?
What happens to the bottom half that fail?
They should pick up their socks, man. How?
What do you do with them?
You have already conceded defeat before you've started. The point I'm trying to make is, when schools go to schools that have achieved 100% pass mark last year, speak to the headmaster and ask them what was their expected pass mark in the classroom. They will tell you they benchmarked it at 60%.
You're answering
and managed to push the system up.
You're answering a question I didn't ask. The question is, what happens to the bottom half of learners that don't pass?
What I'm saying to you is that if you progressively move it up 35, 40, 45, 50%, you are going to force your education system to ensure that young people and more young people pass.
Okay.
But lowering standards is not the solution here.
We're going to have to leave it there. Musa Maimane, thank you so much for your time. Dr. Musa Maimane.
And guys, I have an update on the same story. You remember, this is what it was said when it started.
Parliament is tomorrow expected to vote on a motion to scrap the 30% pass mark, or at least pass rate, as described by Build One South Africa. The motion was commissioned by the leader of Build One South Africa, Musi Maimane. Maimane argues that 30% is a low threshold that does a disservice to the country.
So the Parliament has voted, and surprise, surprise, they have rejected Musi's motion. And I don't understand. I just do not understand. I do not understand. So there's this article that came today. It came out today from the Eyewitness News. And it says that Parliament rejects Maimane's bid to have matric pass mark increased to 50%. The motion introduced by Build One South Africa leader Musi Maimane advocated for a gradual increase in the 30% benchmark, saying the low pass rate has wider implications for learners in the future. Build One South Africa leader Musi Maimane's motion to have the matric pass increased from 30% to 50% has been rejected by the National Assembly. The motion introduced by Maimane advocated for a gradual increase in the 30% benchmark, saying the low pass rate has wide implications for learners in the future. But the move that called for greater basic education reforms was rejected by the African National Congress and the Democratic Alliance, but received support from other opposition parties. So the ANC and the DA are the ones that are saying, yeah, we are fine with 30%. Yeah, it's fine. 30%, keep the 30%. Keep the 30%. The move that called for greater basic education reforms was rejected by the ANC and the DA, but received support from other opposition parties. So now the ANC and the DA have used their majority to block this. The ANC and the DA, they are fine with your children getting 30%. They are fine with your children finishing up school and still not being able to read or write for meaning. Disgraceful, man. Absolutely disgraceful. My man said the low 30% pass mark has been set up by the education authorities to beef up the pass rate numbers, of course. He added that the debate on this motion was important because young people can prove to do better if they receive their proper early education and primary school education. Quote, ending the 30% pass mark is not the only standard reform. It signals the seriousness that we uphold in our standards. But on Tuesday night, the parties voted on the motion, with the two biggest political parties, the ANC and the DA, voting against it, while the Economic Freedom Fighters, the IFP and the Action SA voted in support of the motion. The motion fell away, but similar motions can be tabled in the near future. Man. And I'm like, I would like to understand, man. I would actually like to understand why the ANC and the DA voted against this motion. I don't understand. I don't understand why the ANC and the DA decided to like, no, Muslim money. These children are okay with 30%. We understand the implications of having these people to pass with 30%, but 30% is fine for these people. What was the reason from the ANC and the DA? What was the reason? Because this, honestly, it feels like a stab in the back. As a South African, it actually feels like a stab in the back. That at least we have people that are trying to make some things work. And now you have these two political parties using their majority to block this. What was the reason? What was the reason, guys? I don't understand. What was the reason? And what are your thoughts, guys? What are your thoughts about the 30%? Do you think that the 30% should be raised to 50%? And do you agree with Musime Mali? I don't know. Please take what you think in the comment section. Don't forget to hit the like button and the most important part, subscribe. My name is Thomas Mabaso. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.